All right. Also, the video of the webinar will be distributed to our listserv and posted on our website in the coming days. Attendees will be on mute the whole time, but if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please try to limit your questions to 2. That will allow us to get to as many attendees as possible who have questions. So the format for today's discussion is a panel discussion moderated by Senator Bostar. We'll start with our panelists being asked a series of questions by Senator Bostar, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. And again, if you have them, type them in the Q&A box down at the bottom. So I want to provide a little bit of context about why we're having this webinar discussion today. Ahead of the 2022 legislative session, there's a lot of discussion about policy changes Nebraska can enact to attract and retain folks. And what we wanted to do is talk to some real Nebraskans about what would go into their location decisions, and also in some cases, some of our panelists do some recruiting work. And so what they hear from folks as they try to attract and retain them here to the state. Our panelists today are Kyle Arganbright, Mayor of Valentine, co-founder and executive vice president of Sandhill State Bake and co-founder of Bolo Beer Company. Dr. Shirley Vargas, who's a senior administrator in the Nebraska Department of Education. She works to ensure the best possible performance of our state's public schools. Liz Codina, a community investment officer with Peter Kiewit Foundation, where among other things, she supports community vitality efforts in Omaha and helps build capacity in the nonprofit sector. And Pam Hitchens, manager of physician recruiting and onboarding at Nebraska Medicine here in Omaha. And then we also have Senator Eliot Bostar. He's of Lincoln, elected in 2020. He serves on the banking, commerce, insurance, and revenue and planning committees. So all of our panelists will provide some personal insight about what's going into their location decisions. And then again, Kyle and Pam also, I think, will provide some interesting insight as folks who try to recruit people to their communities. So that's the formal part, the introductions. So this is the part where I hand it over to Senator Bostar to start the questions, and I go on hide. I'm really excited for this conversation. So thanks, everyone. Senator Bostar, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. And good morning, everyone. So I want to start with a question to ask what brought you personally to Nebraska, or if you are originally from Nebraska, what keeps you here? And let's start with Shirley.
Thank you so much, Senator. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shirley Vargas. Like Chuck mentioned in the introduction, I work for the Nebraska Department of Education, and I want to be super vulnerable here in that I have only been a Nebraskan for a little over 3.5 years. So my perspective is from my limited time here, and I want to be super mindful of that so that you all know where my thoughts are coming from. I was born and raised in the South Bronx in New York, and I came to Nebraska by way of South Dakota and my doctoral studies, in that I wanted to work with Native American populations and learn about what attributes to their educational outcomes, because that was a population of students that I hadn't worked with before, and I was genuinely intrigued and really wanted to get to know more about a community that I was not necessarily a part of. Additionally, I also wanted to learn more about rural America. I mean, there's a lot of different perspectives and single stories that exist about what it means to be part of the Midwest or the Great Plains, whatever it might be. So much so when I told my friends and colleagues I was moving to Nebraska, the question was like, why? Are you going to live in a cornfield? Like, we're going to live on a farm? Like, what are you going to do? And so these perceptions are still true in 2021. And it's, it's just really interesting to me that as an educator, I know that there are students across our country that, deserve, an excellent educational experiences that awards them and allows them opportunities to excel in whatever their potential, whatever their areas of interest are. And I really wanted to be a part of that because there's just wonderful things happening here. And I also wanted to understand the context a little bit better of, what it means to be a Nebraskan. So you might see my Zoom picture. It's me in a cornfield. I actually love corn. My family is from Peru and the Dominican Republic. And It's something that culturally is important to me, but it's also something that is a different perspective to learn about being here in Nebraska. And my life as an educator in Nebraska has shown me that there are many different communities who are trying their absolute best to support the youth that they serve and that they have. And through my work in school improvement, I support a variety of communities and spend a lot of my time on the road. I've been to nearly 60 of the 93 counties, and I take that as a badge of honor because I get in my car and drive to many of these different places to get really proximate and get really close to what teachers, students, and families and communities experience on a daily basis so that we at the State Department can provide more appropriate solutions. So I came here for an opportunity to learn personally, kind of selfishly, about myself and also what I can, learn about other communities and also to contribute to the educational landscape in Nebraska and to continue to support the great work that's happening here.
Great, thank you. Liz, same question for you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me as a guest on this panel, and thank you to all of the participants for taking time out of their day to listen in on the conversation. I am originally from El Paso, Texas, but moved to Omaha, Nebraska at the age of 4. Originally, family ties brought me to the state, and ultimately what has really encouraged me to stay here for, over 27 years have really been a variety of items. So I, currently work in the philanthropic sector, also have major ties to the nonprofit sector here, not only in Omaha, but across the state. And one of the things that I'm super passionate about personally is really focusing on making communities, not only in Omaha, but across the state, more inclusive and really encouraging that dialogue about social justice and what it really takes to provide equitable opportunities for all of our community members. So originally, when asked this question, I really started to think about where I was as just a human 10 plus years ago. And I really thought about the big picture items that really motivated me to stay here when I was at a crossroads of either staying here for college or leaving. So ultimately, the cost of living, which is originally what brought my family here, in addition to those family ties, encouraged me to stay here for college. Also, college affordability, which is, a big topic of discussion these days, especially because of all of the national things going on with student debt forgiveness. So in addition to those items, just being really tied to the local community and realizing that our population shifts are ever growing and changing, especially with the rising Latinx population growth, and really that long-term desire to continue to build that community that I've called home for 27 plus years, and to also continue the work that I'm so passionate about, which is really to focus on those nonprofit capacity building initiatives. And in addition to that, creating more equitable opportunities for all Nebraskans.
Great, thank you. Pam, same question.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm really excited to be able to participate with these panelists, and for those who are in attendance, I'm really excited for this opportunity for the conversation today. I'm Pam Hitchens. I am the manager of physician recruiting and onboarding at Nebraska Medicine, and have accountability for that for all of the physicians that we recruit to Nebraska Medicine and UNMC. I came to Omaha a little more than 18 years ago as a result of a corporate transfer, and have a very similar experience 18 years ago to what Shirley references 3 years ago. So even 18 years ago, that same perception of when I told my friends we're being transferred to Omaha, Nebraska, one of the first questions was, where is that? The second question was very similar. Are you gonna live in a cornfield? Are you guys moving to a farm? Is there really are there corporations that would transfer you guys to Nebraska? Are you moving to Idaho? There are so many questions that existed and perceptions about our state 18 years ago that still exist today, that we struggle at Nebraska Medicine when recruiting physicians. We sometimes struggle with those perceptions. Reason that I chose to stay, our children were small when we were transferred here, and Omaha has become home. It was home to them. We very quickly made friends. We very quickly were accepted in a variety of ways, and our children grew up here, and this is home to them. And so that sense of community that they developed and that we developed very soon after coming here, the sense of helpfulness, the Nebraska nice really is real. And even before it was a slogan, when we got here 18 years ago, Nebraska nice is real, and is something that we exemplify when we are sharing with physicians in our recruitment efforts, that a lot of building of relationships is an easy thing to do, and getting acclimated is an easy, in some cases, thing to do. And so a large part of the reason that I stay is because even though my kids are now adults and they're all doing different things, but growing up here was a beautiful experience, and that's really the reason that I stay.
Thank you, Pam. Kyle, why do you stay in Nebraska?
Thanks, Elliot. I'll to start off too, I just wanted to mention, I think people attraction is probably our state's #1 issue. When I look at the population growth totals from 2010 to 2020, there were 18 counties of our 93 that were growing. That means 80% of our counties were shrinking. And that's a concern economically. That's a concern from quality of life perspective. It's a concern from a sustainability perspective in many small towns. So starting off by saying that, I guess my story, I was born and raised in Valentine, Nebraska. I went to school in Lincoln. And then I went out. I lived in a few different states. I saw different places. And I didn't see anything that really competed with Nebraska. Obviously, the relationships I have in this state and in the Sandhills are deep, and that was, that really pulled me back. But more than anything else, it's the quality of life that's in this state. I think the pace is really comfortable. I think the people are great, and there's opportunity here. There's economic opportunity. There's opportunity for families, and so that's why I chose to come back to Nebraska and back to my hometown in rural Nebraska. And I think this story is similar to a lot of others that have returned in rural communities as well.
Great. Well, I'm certainly very thankful that all of you have either come to Nebraska or have decided to stay in Nebraska. With that, and we've heard a little bit about it with some of your first answers, but I want to ask, have you ever considered leaving Nebraska? And if so, why? And what were the what did you end up weighing to ultimately decide to stay here? And we'll go in the same order. So Shirley, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So again, like I started with total vulnerability, right? I have considered what it would be like to leave Nebraska and either go to another state or go back home to New York. And there are a couple of reasons. Some might seem a little trivial, like where am I going to get the food that I really enjoy eating rather than making it myself? Or, everything closes at a certain time, right? Fine. Like those little things you learn to live with, right? And you're like, that can't be the ultimate, tipping point. But then there are other pieces around, like, how do you establish a sense of community if you're a single person moving to a place where you know no one for work, right? At what point is work no longer enough to keep you in a particular setting? And that's something that I grapple with, relatively regularly sometimes, in all honesty. And I chuckle because of the nervousness that comes with that. These are life decisions that people are making, whether it's to move to a certain location because of an opportunity with hopes that other things will fall into place. And if they don't, then what happens, right? So those are things that I've considered around, like what it would mean if I were to move away to another state or another part of the country, whatever. And sometimes those things don't necessarily outweigh the reasons why I choose to stay. So work is really meaningful, to be able to get across the state and truly get to know different communities that maybe the conversations and their experiences are not elevated to a statewide level. Those are things that if I could use my privilege and my position to do, I love to do that. And I want to do that. And I get to do that, right? So I get to be in conversations that others might not be, and I get to use that voice. And I think that's a lot of power, to be able to say, I can bring a message and then hopefully bring the appropriate representation, to the table, to the office, to whatever. So I have considered, and I have also considered not to, which is why I'm still here. And I hope to be here for a long time if that's possible.
Thank you for sharing that. Liz.
So as I mentioned, I'm originally not from Nebraska, but whenever I get the question, which so many of us often do, where are you from? I always say Omaha, Nebraska. So I wasn't born here. I'm a, Texan originally, but I've lived here for such a long time that I've really have formed a strong bond to this community, not only in Omaha, where I currently reside, but also to the communities across the state that I've had the pleasure of socializing in or working in or visiting for short periods of time for a variety of reasons. When I think about my future and the opportunities that I want, not only for myself, but potentially a family, I start thinking about the luxuries or the great things that Nebraska has to offer. And in some cases, when compiling that list of desires, needs, and wants, that would allow me to work in a place that is thriving, to live in a prosperous community, and to socialize in a place where I find that sense of community. Sometimes I take a look at the current state of things, right, that landscape, and I consider, would I be happier in another community? So I have to say that I have definitely thought about leaving for other opportunities, just because other cities across not only the Midwest, but the US offer in some cases more diverse amenities, right? So when you take a look at walkability, bikeability, and some of those other, important things that help create thriving communities, sometimes I think that there are other cities that would offer, a relatively low cost of living that's comparable to Nebraska, but in addition to that factor, also offer a variety of things that we don't have. Ultimately, though, because of that sense of community, which several of us have kind of talked about in previous questions, I stay. I definitely feel responsible for the future of not only my community, but the state. And like Shirley, also, take my work very seriously in philanthropy and in the nonprofit sector. And ultimately, I think if I leave, then who continues that work for my community, right? And it doesn't just take one of us, but it takes many of us across all sectors in Nebraska to create those thriving communities. And ultimately, it's that sense of responsibility, right? I want to stay because Nebraska has given both my family and myself so many wonderful opportunities to date, that I feel that deep sense of belonging to this community and that deep sense of needing to contribute and give back to the people that have given so much to me. And that's why, long term, I want to stay in the two sectors that I currently work in and ultimately help vision this greater Nebraska that's accessible to all members of our community, that provides equitable opportunities for all communities, and contribute to that new innovation that will ultimately help everyone prosper across the state.
Great. Pam, same question.
I would like to answer that question from the lens of the physicians that we recruit. I would say that really one of the strongest reasons that they stay is because of the opportunities that they have at Nebraska Medicine and UNMC. Our mission is very strong, and we live that mission every day. You guys have probably all heard the serious medicine, extraordinary care is something that we do take very seriously. And the physicians that we recruit also take that very seriously and have multiple opportunities every day to provide that serious medicine, that extraordinary care. Some of that is research-based, some of that is clinic-based or clinical-based. But much of that work that is being done, as an example, the work that we have done around the pandemic, we have a national reputation around the care and the efforts that we have provided around the pandemic and even prior to the pandemic in terms of caring for Ebola patients. And you've probably all heard about that. So opportunities to be involved in that type of environment and that type of care to patients, which is what physicians went into the profession for in the first place, is a very strong reason to keep them here. We do a lot of work around also getting them acclimated to the community, getting them what we call stickiness, getting them to stick, helping them to have a bond, to find their community that Shirley talked about, and to make connections very early on. As you can imagine, our physicians work long hours, and especially during the pandemic, but even outside of that, work very long hours. And so it's more challenging for them to have time outside of work to develop those communities, to develop that sense of community here. And so that is something that we see as a reason why they might leave, because they don't have ease of making connections, ease of finding others who are in similar situations to them, that they feel comfortable and confident in finding a bond and developing that stickiness in our community. Those are some of the reasons that we see that physicians leave, over and above leaving for other opportunities that may provide them something that we cannot provide at Nebraska Medicine and UNMC.
Thank you. And before we move on to Kyle, Pam, could you talk a little bit more about the kinds of efforts that you go through to help the physicians you recruit find their community or build those connections, or as you called it, acquire that stickiness?
Yes, absolutely. We are very fortunate to have on our team two colleagues that their job title is Community Onboarding Liaison. And their primary role is to help physicians and their families to acclimate to the community. They spend a lot of time getting to know them. When they are toward the end of the recruitment process, they become introduced to those physicians and they get to know their families, they get to know their needs, and they help them with resources. They provide them with, the example that we use for those of you who are Grey's Anatomy fans is their person, the Christina to Meredith Grey. If you're a Grey's Anatomy fan, they become their person so that they have a point of contact. And the community onboarding liaisons spend a lot of their time just getting to know them and helping them to make that sticking point where is the nearest, where is the best pharmacy to go to, or my kid plays the oboe, where are oboe lessons, or what's the best, whatever resource, because we find that a lot of times it's about finding not only the people who are your community, but those people sometimes come from events or activities associated and around common activities for kids. So they spend a lot of time doing that. That is one of the many things that we do. Those community onboarding liaisons are just essential to assisting our new physicians and their families to get sticky.
Thank you. Kyle, question for you.
Yeah, so I did leave and I chose to come back. I think to maybe answer this a little bit differently, I think there's two schools of thought for place selection. Some people, choose a place and decide to make a life there, and other people choose a career and let the places come as they may. I think we've got a really unique opportunity right now with the remote work that's been enabled through COVID to find some more of those people who just want to be in this place in Nebraska somewhere. Continuing to improve broadband and housing, which I'll surely talk about a little bit later, are keys to that. But speaking generally for Western Nebraska, if we lose people, we're losing them to the Black Hills or the Front Range in Wyoming and Colorado. And why is that? People come out west typically for the natural amenities, and they can often find those natural amenities or similar natural amenities in those other states, and often have even maybe more economic or career opportunity there, as well as just more people that provides critical mass for some of those manufactured amenities. So I think it's just continuing to improve that quality of life here in a way that we're competitive, not just with other towns in the state, but other commensurate communities around the Midwest and the Great Plains.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So the next question is there anything that the state, or in particular the legislature, can do that you feel would impact either your personal decision to stay in Nebraska, or if you are someone who's responsible for attracting people to Nebraska, that would have an impact on that? And we were just, I think we're kind of leading into that. So Kyle, why don't we start with you on that?
Yeah, I was initially going to answer this question as quality of life amenities, but I think it's more basic than that. There's some basic livability requirements of people. Broadband, that's the number one question we get when someone's up tubing the Niobrara or golfing in Valentine and having the time of their life in the summer, and they're thinking about maybe moving here. Hey, can I get good broadband? Well, in Valentine, yes, but in some of the rural areas and other small towns around here, you can't still. So that's still a hurdle for attracting some of those people. Housing, I looked this morning, Valentine's got 11 houses for sale, and that's a big win. I'm not sure we've been out of single digits in months. And so we've got to have those houses, but they've got to be of quality and affordable. And so I think we need to continue to tackle that housing issue in the state. In my opinion, Valentine could use another 200 people tomorrow, but we've got nowhere to house them. And so we're working on that, but it takes work and it takes money, and it takes really good plans to do so. So, in the higher level quality of life amenities, I think people want improved childcare options throughout the state, especially in rural Nebraska. That's become a real burden or a barrier, I guess, for getting some maybe mothers into the workforce if they would choose to. Offering high quality childcare, high quality preschool, and high quality development opportunities for those family focused people. That's really important. Strong and attractive main streets are important. Places where you can have those third places where you can build those relationships, those coffee shops, those breweries, those community wellness centers, those public golf courses, those trails, those parks, just places that that can help people pursue a hobby or a passion, and also meet other people to build that social fabric that helps retain them in these communities. So, and this is, I've been writing some columns for the World Herald, and I mentioned this kind of subtly in a column a few weeks ago, but I think the state government could look at maybe shipping some jobs out west. We've got a missing middle, in my opinion, economically. And there are some really good jobs at the state that, over time could maybe be based throughout the state. I think it's been shown that at times there's better retention, and I think that there's a really good quality pool of candidates out here too. And so, that the improving the quality of life and the economic opportunities are all hand in hand out here for continuing to attract people. And I think the state could be very helpful in that.
Excellent, thank you. Liz?
Thank you for the question. So one of the things that I have thought about is how can our entire state really shift towards being a talent-driven economy and creating economic development plans in different regions across the state that really focus on just that. So as I mentioned, our population across the state is ever changing and it's becoming more diverse. When I think about diversity, I think about the fact that, not everyone has a 4-year college track, right? There are some individuals, especially when you look at the huge disparities between our communities across the state, that want to get into the workforce right away. So when I think about some of the state level policies that can be enacted or some of the state level work that can be done, it would be really to create those opportunities for a diverse group of people. So to me, working so heavily in education and in the social sector, that means making large scale investments in our state educational system, whether that's a 2-year path or just a tech training path or even 4-year paths. But when we look at how large of a segment of our population comes from a low income background, like I did once upon a time, for me and for many others, it's really important to have access points and a good pathway to not only a meaningful career and job, but also access to a job that provides a livable wage and allows everyone to be able to reach that higher quality of life. In addition to that, some of the things that I think are also important to the talent, especially when we think about attracting young professionals or keeping young professionals here, is making sure that we're challenging ourselves and our communities to be welcoming, to be inclusive, and to be equitable. And that really can be addressed at all different levels. So not only at the education level, but also taking a look at traditionally, for example, in Omaha, what are the pockets of town that receive state dollars for economic development, right? So as all of you are aware, there's heavy redlining across Nebraska, and that's very evident in my town of Omaha, Nebraska. And we have to think about what the long-term impacts of policies like that have been, and then start thinking about how we can create platforms for everyone to be able to access that high quality of life. One of the quotes that really stuck with me from my college days at the University of Nebraska at Omaha was a professor, talking about when we all do better, we all do better, right? So ensuring that we're focusing on strategies and initiatives that really take a look at who's falling behind, who doesn't have those equitable access points, and doing everything we can to shift investments to ensure that the bulk of our population across the state can access a quality education that's affordable, that can, to Kyle's point, find an affordable place to live, and then also stay in a community that makes them feel welcomed and wanted and like they belong here.
Excellent. Thank you, Liz. Shirley?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts, and I think some of the legislation that could definitely help to have people come and want to stay or return to their home state and stay has to do with supporting career and technical education. So similarly to what we just heard with Liz and Kyle, I think that it's important to also understand that education does play a role here. And we're asking schools to do a lot with little. And specifically in many of our smaller communities in which, there may only be 4 landowners that are contributing to that school's funding source. So it's really important to consider what it would mean for a state like Nebraska, which is the only state across the country that does not have a state allocation for career and technical education. So some states usually match whatever the Perkins federal funding is. And for Nebraska, it would be about like maybe 7 million or so. I mean, that's not chump change, right? I understand that that's a significant amount of money, but when we're talking about investing not only in the immediate but long-term future of our state, it's important to think about what does it mean to support the educational component that also is supporting all these other pieces around ensuring that we're preparing our youth for high demand, high skill, high wage careers. And the other I would say is that I cannot deny the fact that, we are living in a political, social climate in which anything we might say or do, and I say we as a general public, can be misconstrued or can be, used as whatever it might be. It's important to note that we all come with different perspectives, right? And there's an opportunity for people, for the general public who may live across lines of difference, to actually come together and talk about what it means to heal our communities and move forward in a really productive and intentional and genuine way. And there's also an opportunity for us to not model that by perpetuating or potentially even advocating for silencing or stifling perspectives or thoughts that may be different. And there's an opportunity that, let's be honest, right? The history of our state, let alone our country, might not always be the most perfect or pretty, but it doesn't mean that we shy away from that. We have to be able to think about ways in which we learn from and come together and understand our first basic humanity, and then understand what also makes us unique and how that's an area of asset, not necessarily a negative piece. So I think legislation that comes across that might do that would in fact not allow educators across our state, let alone myself as an educator, feel like I could do my job to the best of my ability. And I am speaking as an individual. While I do work for the Nebraska Department of Education, I am not speaking on behalf of them. So I just want to make that clear. This is just my personal perspective around that opinion. And I think that it's just really important for our legislators, our senior leadership across our agencies and across our communities to model that, because our youth are watching and they're picking up whatever we're putting out there, whether we believe it or not. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to lead by example.
Thank you, Shirley. And Pam.
To piggyback on to Liz and Shirley's comments about education, I would add that our legislators could look at opportunities for growing our own. And in healthcare, there are so many opportunities in healthcare. There's so many jobs available and so many different career paths within healthcare. And there are so many kids in our communities that are not exposed, that don't have knowledge of the broad opportunities that are available. So exposing kids or providing opportunities to expose children to what is available in healthcare and to give them continuous exposure and positive exposure and programs that enhance their interest, first to spike that interest, and then to continue to enhance that interest. And I believe that has to happen at a very early age so that they see that healthcare is a very desirable place to work, and you don't have to be a clinical person. I don't touch patients. I've never touched patients. I'd probably faint. It's a good idea that I don't touch patients, but there are opportunities, broad opportunities that are available, that growing our own gives us the opportunities for retention. Even if they grow up and they go to college somewhere else and they come back, that would be another opportunity similar to Kyle's experience of leaving and coming back, because there are positions available, there are opportunities available, that healthcare is a great career, and there are a lot of them available. So I think if our legislators would work on programs and opportunities for that, that would really be beneficial to recruiting and retaining young professionals to our state.
If I could just jump in, Eliot, I just want to emphasize Liz's comment too about the regionalized approach to this. You know, in rural communities, we view the state as an important partner, much like we view the foundations and other entities throughout the state that help us. But you know, these solutions have to be locally driven. And if the state sees good things happening in some of these communities, I think they should throw fuel on the fire, because they've got some momentum. They've got that community leadership. They've got the capacity, you know, and I think we could really enhance maybe some of the efforts that are already happening. But the numbers attached to some of these projects are fairly difficult to get done alone, and it takes partners. And so if the state can help facilitate that and be really supportive, I think that's the answer. I think there really isn't a panacea necessarily.
Excellent. So I was just taking some notes while all of you were talking, and just wanted to kind of summarize some of the things that I heard in no particular order. So talent development, investment in education, jobs that provide a livable wage, welcome and inclusive communities that are, and then have a tie-in for state investment in accomplishing some of that, access to high quality of life with a focus on equity, career and technical education investments, being open to different thoughts and perspectives, leading by example, highlighting opportunities in healthcare, and I also added, in other high growth fields, and developing our own kind of base of support from that, and getting young people interested early on, broadband, access to housing, childcare, and strong Main Street with social infrastructure in our communities, and local focused solutions. Hopefully that encompassed at least most of what you said. I will probably go back and review this again to make sure I got it all. Okay, so we're going to move on to some audience questions. And so the question is, there's often an argument that Nebraska's tax structure encourages people to leave. Does this align with your experience? And I will say that as a member of the Revenue Committee, this is something that I certainly hear a lot. So I'm very interested in your responses. Let's start with Pam.
From a physician perspective, I would say no. It is not something that I hear very commonly, but to be fully transparent, physicians are highly compensated. And so the tax structure, while it's not attractive, is not necessarily a deterrent. What would be, however, helpful, although you didn't ask, but what would be, however, helpful is the ability to qualify for, and I think someone mentioned earlier during the call, to be able to qualify for federal or some type of, whether it's state, assistance with student loan repayment. Physicians have large student loan debt for the most part. And so if there were opportunities to participate or to have student loan debt forgiveness or student loan debt assistance, that would be a great benefit and attractor, as well as a retention strategy. But the tax burden is not something that I hear very commonly.
Excellent, thank you. I added student loan repayment to the list. Liz?
I would say for me personally, it's not a major consideration. And in full transparency, you know, when I attend young professional events in the community, it's often not, it's rarely something that comes up, if at all. Typically, those conversations for me and other young professionals that I interact with in the community, we really talk about that bigger sense of belonging to this community, the amenities that we have access to, and then, as you know, we have all echoed here, education and career opportunities are really the things that you know, come to mind for me. I want to be living in a community that makes me feel like this is home, and I want to live in a community where I know that I have opportunities to increase my quality of life. You know, as I mentioned, I grew up low income, and the only reason that I was able to attend college was because I received you know, state funding for my education, then also received philanthropic support through a Fulbright scholarship. And then I've been lucky enough to find, you know, my home in a lot of jobs here in Omaha and in Lincoln that have given me opportunities to grow and have created pathways for me to vision a greater future for myself and for other young professionals that choose to come here and choose to stay here.
Excellent, thank you. Shirley?
Similarly to Pam, I hadn't heard a lot of educators necessarily being like, geez, you know, if taxes were lower, I would definitely come to Nebraska and teach, or be a principal. Like, that's not like the sound bites I hear. What I do hear is similar to what Kyle mentioned before, is like, will there be housing available? Like, where will I live if I come, you know, to McPherson County? And I don't mean to pick on any one county, but just to provide you all like a visual representation of what it would mean if there's a school district that's, you know, looking to recruit teachers, but if there's no housings for sale, or the school can't support with like finding, you know, areas for them to live like relatively quickly, not, you know, however long it might take to build a home, like those types of things are the pieces in which educators are thinking about. And wondering also, one of the questions I saw, because I took a sneak peek, was around like, you know, well, how do we build this pipeline component, right? Well, how do we then also support our students who are currently in school to see their community as something worth investing in versus I need to leave because there's nothing for me to invest in, right? So education could be, you know, that type of venue where they have positive experiences in their school and want to come back and contribute to that same positive experience for the next generation that comes through. As I would see that more as like as a perspective than taxes being one.
Thank you. And Kyle?
Yeah, you know, I think that we do have high taxes. I sit here 9 miles from South Dakota. There's no state income tax 9 miles north. real estate property taxes are substantially less. It's a problem. I think it's more of a problem for ag producers and for businesses, job creators. For those people picking communities, I think it's about the ROI. Is it a place, that's that's worth that? Does it have the quality of life amenities? Does it have good housing? Can I see myself raising a family here and living my life here? We have a significant number of people who live in Valentine who work in South Dakota, and they choose to live in Valentine because the quality of life is better. So I think it's a consideration, but if we can achieve, a quality of life that that justifies, I guess, that investment, I think we can minimize the effects of that. And that's, that's coming from a town. We've got one of the lowest property tax rates in the state. And I don't know that people are selecting Valentine because of that property tax rate.
Thank you. All right, we have a question here for Kyle. How do you think the discussion about being more welcoming, more inclusive, and more equitable would be received in rural Nebraska?
I think rural Nebraska is welcoming. And honestly, we're so short of people. We don't have the luxury of, of not being. I can think of people that moved to this state from Washington, Oregon, Utah, Idaho, Colorado, California, and they're coming from completely different places. I think the trick is just, like Pam had mentioned, that community onboarding liaison that UNMC has. We, as communities, we've got to have a similar function so that we can just build relationships one-on-one with people and help them find their place in the community. Valentine is we're 9 miles from South Dakota. Across the border is the Rosebud Indian Reservation, and we've had a long, healthy relationship with a totally different population. So I don't see that really as an issue from our perspective, but I think there are some maybe preconceived notions about that. Liz or Shirley had talked about the idea that are you living in a cornfield if you come to Nebraska? There's all these ideas like, oh, how weird is it? How rural is it? No, if people just are able to sit down and spend some time together and build relationships, I think we can always find commonalities, and our systems support all people.
Excellent, thank you. I have a question for Pam. What are the main factors that contribute to physicians choosing to come here? And how do you sell Nebraska to them?
Really, one of the main and thank you for the question. One of the main factors is the opportunity. As I mentioned before, we have so many opportunities at Nebraska Medicine and UNMC, and so many opportunities to do such great work with patients. That is really one of the main attractors. How do we sell Nebraska? To be fully transparent, our greatest success with recruiting physicians is finding physicians who have some type of tie, either to Nebraska or to the Midwest or to Omaha, whether they have a family member here. I think maybe Liz mentioned coming here for family. They have family here, they were trained here, they have a spouse who has family here. And here, meaning the Midwest, some of the states that touch our state, we really have the greatest success. We don't do so well or have as much success with physician candidates who are on the coast because they don't get it. And it's not as attractive. We don't have mountains. We can't compete with oceans. So we don't try, not in a negative way. We don't try, but we recognize that, how do you compete with an ocean? So we look at those commonalities of folks who have a tie or a connection to Omaha, to Nebraska, to the Midwest, and really promote the opportunity and really promote relationships and really promote being welcoming and inclusive and equitable. And so those are some of the things that we find are our most successful strategies.
Great, thank you. We only have a few minutes left, so we'll try to get everyone's ability to kind of add something to this. And we've talked a bit about it already, but the question is, what does Nebraska need to do to attract and welcome young professionals in particular? And so let's start with Kyle.
I think part of that is critical mass. Getting enough and getting them together so that they don't feel alone is important. You might look around and not think that there are a lot of young professionals in communities, but when you really start poking around, they're there. And so the other thing is, though, I think those people want to utilize their talents in their community, and so finding avenues to get them involved, either in nonprofits in the communities or for on community committees, whatever it might be. So I think from a rural perspective, I think that's a little bit how we approach it.
Great. Shirley?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts. Similarly to Kyle, I think being able to ask students and have them engaged. So I'm taking an education perspective, obviously, right? So ask students and have them engaged in their school community, I think is one great way for them to be able to see that education, A, is a viable field for them to enter, and B, their community is worth investing in. Therefore, they may go away to college and may want to come back and continue to build on the educational experience that they had. We have a number of lists of schools that, maybe on other lists based on a bunch of indicators and maybe underperforming, whatever the case might be. But it doesn't mean that they're any less worthy of attention and care, right? I think that those lists help to point us at a State Department of where we may need to go and have more localized conversations about context-specific solutions for that community. And being able to, support those communities with identifying, what are things that are going really well, what are things that they can improve upon, are super important. I think the other piece too here is that sometimes slogans like honestly it's not for everyone might be cheeky and also might be really off-putting. So maybe you're from here and you're like, you know what, maybe it isn't even for me and I'm from this state. I have no idea how that is like, right? But I think asking people and getting to know what their perspectives are, especially our youth, who are, I think, the ones we should really be investing in because they're going to be our future leaders. I think it's really important that we bring them to the table. I don't know how often youth go to city council meetings or like local municipal meetings and listen about what, new initiative might be coming out. I also saw a comment about after school, before after school programs that I think is also really important as well, right? Where our youth, as they grow up, can be part of these different initiatives around tutoring younger students, right? Doing a big brother, big sister, like so that they're in themselves creating a sense of community and belonging within their school, and then build those strong ties. And if I see my friend Kyle is going back to Valentine, maybe I should also go. I can also have an opportunity and have a future there too, right? So I think it's building on those relationships and strengthening those connections are important.
Excellent, thank you. Liz?
So as a person that identifies as a woman of color and a young professional, especially in the sectors that I work in, a large percentage of the time, I'm either the youngest person in the room or the only young person, YP in the room, or the only person of color. And a conversation that I often have with my BIPOC peers is the idea that representation does really matter, and our systems across the state need to do whatever they can to create those access points to make sure that we are accessing that diversity of thought. So that includes, maybe taking a look at when we have or host public forums for citizens, creating more opportunities for YPs to have a direct feedback loop so they can voice their concerns and ideas with government, with educational systems, and so forth. And, you know, also making a strong push across the state to involve more young people in local and regional economic development and community visioning plans. And not only just offering, you know, an opportunity that we may think will serve every individual, but we have to realize that not everybody works a salaried 9-to-5 job with an opportunity to leave for a couple of hours in the middle of the day to attend a city council meeting or attend a visioning plan. But we really have to take a look at our population composition and how we can serve different community members with different backgrounds that are approaching life in a different way.
Excellent. Pam.
I know that we are up on time, so I will be very, very brief in my response and piggyback really on what others have said about the perception of the state, kind of rounding back to the beginning of the conversation about the perception of the state, and really promoting what is great about the state of Nebraska and asking for input from a cross section of residents across the entire state, and then using that to help to change, modify, alter our perception to those who are not from and around here, as we look at so many different populations that may be interested in coming here, looking to do some things to change the perception of the state so that we can attract and then retain those folks.
Thank you. And thank you to all the panelists. I know we're about to wrap up. I really appreciated this conversation with all of you and your thoughtful responses. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Senator Bostar. Thank you, Kyle, Shirley, Liz, Pam, for weighing in. It's been a great conversation. As noted earlier, this is being recorded and it will be posted on our website and distributed to our listserv soon. I apologize that we didn't get to all the questions. Panelists, if we packaged a few in written form, would you be willing to respond? So maybe we can get that out in a follow-up as well. So that's it. Thank you. I'll let you guys, everyone return to your Wednesday. Hope everyone has a great day. And again, thanks so much for this great conversation. It was wonderful. So.